All right, so Derek Jeter, I want to show you something.
Oh my gosh. Let me see. That must have been like 96 or 97.
Yeah, so Seattle Mariners, New York Yankees. Look how little you guys are.
I've known Derek almost 30 years.
Yeah.
And to this day, I played with him 25 feet away from me. And he's still a mystery even to me. I always say he's undefeated.
Yeah.
In a place like New York, I've never met anyone like him. I hope that he opens up a little bit because he has so much good to give, so much good to share and talk about some of his experiences.
And his experience is so interesting to me too, because it's like 20 years in New York, as you said, like the hot house, make it there, make it anywhere. And then he sets his sights very early, like you did, on, all right, what's business after baseball? Getting inside sort of his thought process, I think is going to be really good. Wait, so when did you guys first meet? How old were you?
I was 18. He claimed to be 17.
That's a fact.
Where was it?
It was the Mark Light Stadium. Michigan had come down and played the University of Miami. And he had signed to go to the University of Michigan, was already a pro with the Yankees. And I was in upcoming draft, and I had signed to go to the University of Miami. So it was like his school versus my school. It was cool.
Wow.
And I was talking to Casey Close at the time, and really got to like Casey Close a lot. And I'm still know Casey, who's been with Derek his whole career.
Casey's my agent.
Yeah.
So we had actually spoke on the phone prior to.
Really? When
Just-
people
we
used to
just-
talk on the phone?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What was it like back then for young athletes? Because it's not like you weren't following them on social media or
No,
vice versa.
Thank God. No, it was more of, I was older. I think, Alex has always been inquisitive. He asks a lot of questions, which I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
When we spoke the first time, you may not even remember, it was just asking some questions about my experience. I was trying to share some of my experience just being a year older. So I think there were some similarities when it came to that. Outside of that, they're pretty, well, I mean, from Kalamazoo, he's from Miami. So
Right.
My memory, Jason, is that obviously there was no social media, but for high school players, there was this thing called Baseball America. And this would come out every 2 weeks. And I remember I would take my mom and she would give me a couple bucks and I would go to 7-Eleven and I would buy it. And a lot of times I would go early 3-4 days to see. I wanted to read every piece of that. And I remember seeing Derek with his burgundy high school uniform, I believe. You had Nike high tops. And I'm like reading about this guy and he's like, okay, he's my color skin. He's from Kalamazoo, Michigan. That's strange. He's a first pick for the Yankees, right? 6th pick overall. But he's 6'3". And like, okay, well, if he can be a first rounder, well, maybe I can too.
Yeah.
So I just remember being incredibly inspired and impressed that someone can be in Kalamazoo, play a much shorter season than we play in Miami, and yet still be the number 1 pick by the New York Yankees. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. So we'll officially start now. So Derek, if you wouldn't mind, please introduce yourself. Tell us what you're doing these days.
Derek Jeter, what am I doing these days outside of being a parent? I have 4 young kids and doing some stuff, commentating with Fox Sports alongside Alex, David Ortiz, Kevin Burkhardt, a few business interests as well, a few companies that I've founded, boards that I'm on. I'm pretty busy.
Yeah.
I'm pretty busy, but it's a good busy. I think, when you talk to athletes, a lot of times when they retire, people think they just stay at home and they start playing golf and drinking wine all day long. As good as that sounds, I think you start preparing yourself for the next chapter. So I keep myself busy.
Yeah. All right. We're going to get into all that, but I want to go back and start, if I can, partner, with sort of where you left off in that story. It's like going to the Yankees. That's probably, this show is called The Deal. It's the biggest business decision you probably make in your early life is you're going to the New York Yankees. Do you remember that moment?
And pass on a scholarship to go to Michigan, which is pretty impressive as it is.
Well, I think they made the decision.
Yeah.
Because in sports, it's a crapshoot. You don't know who's going to draft
Right.
you. You have no idea. So, yeah, as Alex mentioned, I had signed to go to University of Michigan, drafted by the Yankees. Yankee fan growing up, only team I ever wanted to play for. So, in that sense, I was very fortunate. Education was huge in my family. My dad got his PhD in sociology at Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan, the reason why I grew up there. It was really a decision. It was a big decision. It wasn't as easy of a decision as some people may think. So I signed with the Yankees and they agreed to if and when I wanted to go to school, they pay for me to go to University of Michigan. So I went to University of Michigan my first off season, and I'm still a freshman. So you seen that movie Back to School, Rodney Dangerfield? That's going to be me.
It's coming up.
It's coming soon.
But by the way, Jason, just to bring you back to 1992, because I was watching from the sidelines in Miami, from Miami, you know, Derek was born to be a New York Yankee, and he grew up watching the Yankees, admiring the Yankees, wanting to be a shortstop like Rizzuto and all of that. But what was interesting is, leading into that draft, Houston had the number one pick, and there was a lot of talk that Derek would be 1-1 in Houston. They actually ended up drafting the Cal State Fullerton superstar in Phil Nevin. And then Cincinnati had the 5th pick, and they also said they were going to pick Derek, and they chose Chad Mottola. And then it fell to number 6 with the Yankees. So the Yankees caught a huge break by having Derek be available, which no one thought he would be available.
Thank God.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
You know, because I was a Yankee fan. I didn't even know the Yankees were drafted 6th. You know, Alex just sits at home because he was the first pick. You know what I mean? He's just wait for the phone to ring. I'm sitting out there sweating it out, waiting to see who was going to draft me. So, yeah, it's like a crapshoot. I never thought I would be drafted by the Yankees, but, you know, luck was on my side, I guess.
Obviously, you were a fan, but it's one thing to be a fan. It's an entirely different thing, I would imagine, because I'm only a fan. But you put on those pinstripes for the first time. That's an entirely different proposition, because now not only are you a Yankee, you're playing in the biggest stage. Did that feel weighty to you?
No, not necessarily. I think playing for the Yankees now is a little bit different than when I first arrived. They hadn't had a lot of success. The Yankees hadn't won a World Series since '78. You know, they haven't been to one, I think, till 1981. They lost to LA. So I think the expectation level was a little bit different when I first got to New York. And now I think the expectation levels have changed. They've risen because of the success of the franchise. But, you know, when you get there, I don't think you put that much pressure on yourself. You're just trying to keep your job. You know, I don't know if you remember, we had a conversation, I think this was in 1995, towards the end of the year, we were playing Seattle. And you had mentioned, man, I wish they'd just give us an orientation year where we can hit 260 our first year and get comfortable. You never had the orientation year, but that was our mindset. We're there. We want to stay there. We do anything we can to stay in the major leagues. So I don't think I ever put that much pressure on myself or thought about it as being weight.
I don't know if you remember this one. I mean, we're here in LA, probably after that year, 95. And we're both kind of going into our orientation year, and we're in a cab ride. And I think we might have both left our money back. That's when we actually needed to have cash, not like now. And we were just like, man, if we can just make $1 million in our careers, if they put a contract right in front of me for $1 million for my career, I think I would sign it. Would you? He's like, hell yeah, $1 million, a lot of money. I'm glad we have a contract or a pen.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, but it was it's interesting you say that, Derek, because baseball was at a different moment in the early 90s. I mean, what was the scene like as a player?
I would say, in my opinion, at that moment when we first came up, baseball was the number one sport in the country. I really do feel that way. I think now, you know, basketball, NFL is taking off. But at that moment, I just think baseball was the number one sport.
Yeah.
And so many people played it. I mean, we all played it when we were younger. So that's probably the biggest difference in my mind. And we just, you know, baseball's a sport anyone can play, any size, shape. You don't have to be 7 feet tall. You don't have to, you don't have to be, take this the right way, you don't have to be in the best of shape to play baseball, but I'm a little biased. I don't know what you think about being a number one sport back in the early 90s, mid 90s, but that's the way I looked at it.
Everything just felt so big. And partly was we were teenagers coming up, and we had a tremendous passion for the game. And I don't know if data supports this, but I certainly feel like baseball was number one. And I remember the 90s, and when you guys started winning those championships, that wasn't just a New York story. That was like a global story. I mean, the Yankees being back on top was so good for the health of the game of baseball. They're a little bit like the Cowboys and the Lakers. You either love them or hate them, but you never walk by and say, how do you feel about the Yankees? I don't have an opinion. Everyone has an opinion. And Derek was right in the forefront to lead those championship years, which was awesome.
You never ignore New York teams.
Right.
I think baseball's, once again, people are going to say I'm biased, but I think baseball's in a better condition when the Yankees are doing well, when the Red Sox are doing well, when the Dodgers are doing well, when the Cubs, they just won recently. When you have those big market teams that are having some success, I think it's better for the sport.
And so picking up where Alex just was, you do, the team starts experiencing a lot of success. So what does that do for you in terms of seeing not just the business of baseball, but the business of Derek Jeter? Because then you get to negotiate some contracts. And how does that evolve through the 90s for you?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, when you're young, you don't think about the business of baseball. You're just out there playing.
Yeah.
Like Alex mentioned, we were signed a $1 million contract for life if we had the chance to do it, because you're not thinking about the business side. I think you're sort of alerted or made aware of the business side once you start going to arbitration.
Yes.
That's when you sit down and you understand how other people may feel about your performance on the field. I have a better understanding for it now because I was on the other side of it. Or I should say another side. It shouldn't be one side or the other. It's another side of the sport. But I think that's when I realized the business of baseball.
What did you learn about that? Because you did go through it, you went through arbitration, you were negotiating some pretty key contracts for yourself through the end of the 90s there.
Yeah, it was harsh. I think arbitration, you ever go to arbitration?
But I heard it's nasty.
Yeah, I mean, going through arbitration for the first time is hard. You're actually sitting in a room looking across the executives from your organization, and they're telling you basically how you're no good.
Yeah.
And you never had that understanding. You never thought they felt this particular way. So if you don't have thick skin, you can't go through it. Because there have been players that, you get scarred by the organization. You never recover from it. I got scarred, right? But I was just able to hide it a little bit better. But so when you go through that situation, that is a harsh lesson in business. And, my contract negotiations from that point forward, the long-term extension I had, it really wasn't that, Alex did me a favor. He signed a long-term deal before me. You know what I mean? So I sort of piggybacked off of his deal. But it didn't really get messy until the end of my career.
Yeah. And what about Steinbrenner? I mean, on the other side of that table, we got to talk about George, because both of you guys had a relationship with him. What did you make of him as a young person? And then as you went along, what did you make of them?
One, he was smart. He wasn't in the arbitration room. He kept the distance when it came to that. But no, I think, Alex knows as well. He, in my opinion, he's one of the greatest owners in all of sports, because he cared about the organization. He cared about winning. He would do anything it took to win. He was willing to pay the players, but he had high expectations. There's a lot of accountability there. He liked to challenge his top players to see if you could take it. He would challenge you publicly. He would do, you got there's towards the end of the boss, but when he was younger, he would challenge you publicly. And then he'd see how you respond. He'd walk into a clubhouse after a game, after a series. If you're playing well, he'd shake your hand. If you weren't playing well, he'd look you up and down, shake his head, and go to the next guy. That's just what he would do. But he wanted to see
he would
how
do that
you
in the
respond.
locker room.
Oh, no question. Yeah. Yeah, there's a story. Stories of him and Wells going after it, going after each other. So there's a lot of stories when it comes to the boss, but you have to have thick skin in order to survive in New York. And, he demanded excellence, and he wanted you to win every day. He was an old football coach. Right. So, he didn't really understand that in the course of a 162 game schedule, you could actually lose a game. Like that it didn't translate. Something didn't click in his mind. In that sense, we had the same mindset. Every game you play, you have an opportunity to win a game. And he expected that.
And Derek, when it came down to your first championship in '96, I know how much that meant to him. How happy was he? I know how much he loved you and how much you loved him and how special your relationship was. And like you said, I got there to a little bit towards the end. Can you share some of the things that he inspired you with, that motivated you, that kind of bonded you?
Yeah, we used to always, he lived in Tampa. I lived in Tampa for 20-something years. We used to always get together in the off season. And we get together for lunch. And, he's a big Ohio State guy, a big Michigan guy. So we had that, rivalry to, compete with. But he listened to the players. Not saying he listened to every opinion I had, but he would ask. And I do think if you're in professional sports, if you're in an ownership position, you should listen to the players who are in the clubhouse. You don't have to make every decision based on their input, but you should at least hear their input, because that's how you know the balance of things that are going on inside the clubhouse. So the boss was good like that. And, we had the relation. He asked me about players. He'd ask me about, not saying he listened to me, like I said.
Yeah.
So take any names out of it, Derek. Obviously, we don't need to mention names, but give me an example of how
I'll
he
give
would
you an
ask
example,
Yeah.
and I'll give you a name. I remember in offseason
Great.
telling Mr. Steinbrenner that Luis Sojo helped me more than any infielder at the time that I played with, or any coach. And he re-signed Sojo after that.
Wow.
Because Louis was a guy, Louis,
the best.
Louis is the best. And I learned so much from him. And if you're in the front office, so to speak, you may not know the value that Louis Sojo brings to young players in that clubhouse.
Yeah.
But the boss wanted to know.
I'll give you a Louis Soho story. So I had him in Seattle, and Louis is like, you just gotta love the guy. He's one of these guys, and Tim Raines is like this.
Yeah.
You look at him, you just start laughing. Yeah. He hasn't even opened his mouth, but he's so damn funny. Well, Louis has that in Spanish, right? He's Venezuelan, and I was 19 years old. He was backing me up, whatever that means, and
he was 45 at the time.
He was 45.
He was 45 at the time.
And there was a play that I got as a shortstop, and I kind of a little lackadaisical and got it forced, and we couldn't get the double play. I'm 19. I think I'm pretty cool. We're playing at the Kingdom. So I come in like strutting around. And he's looking at me like giving me a bad look. And Louis never gives you a bad look. And he's like, what are you doing? I said, well, I got the force. I got one out. He goes, no. He's like, you got to get two. Attack that ball and give him a good toss and get two. We need two outs there. And I'll never forget that, because the point is, if there's an opportunity to get two. And sometimes a player can tell you that and not a coach.
Right.
And I'm glad that he was such a leader for you as well, because he really changed my career.
What did he do specifically for you?
We'd work every day in ground balls. He made it fun.
Okay.
You play every single day baseball for a reason. 162 games. It didn't get monotonous. You have to have fun with it. But have fun, but at the same time, work extremely hard at it. And Louis was big on that. He made it fun, though.
And through the 90s, obviously you guys are keeping in touch. You're sort of taking a look at what he's doing. You guys are playing each other now and again. This is called The Deal. So let's fast forward a little bit to he shows up in New York. Mm-hmm. There's a pretty important deal that has to be cut at that point, because he's also a shortstop. Do you remember how all that went down?
Yeah, well, I wasn't a part of that deal. When Mr. Steinbrenner called and said that we were signing Alex, he said, we're signing Alex as a third baseman, which I never thought would happen. I mean, why, if you're him, why would you switch positions? I guess he really wanted out of Texas. So he's willing to play anywhere. But no one ever, and I give it to him, he never asked to play shortstop, never brought it up. I never heard any whispers about it, because he had committed to playing third base. And that's what I was told at the time.
Yeah.
It's interesting. My side of that story is Tom Hicks, who's the owner of Texas, was having some financial situation where he needed to move some contracts around. And I remember walking into his house on a Saturday morning after the season. And I think the wild card was game. We were watching Minnesota against Oakland in his home in Texas, in his home office. And he said, Alex, I need to trade you. Can you give me 3 teams? I said, okay, give me till Monday. And I called him back Monday and I said, all right, Red Sox, Angels, and Mets. And I thought the Mets was really interesting, because I grew up watching Magic versus Bird. And the first thing I would do in the morning is see what Derek did in the old box score when we had to read the papers. So I thought me going to New York would be great for baseball. I would be with the Mets. He's with the Yankees. We're both shortstops. We both like the Angels. We always have great weather, great place to play. And then the Red Sox was like, okay, that's a good rivalry too. I worked in the Red Sox deal for 2 months. That deal literally at the 1 yard line fell apart. And Cashman at the MVP dinner said, hey, if you're willing to move to third base, maybe we'll make something happen. Well, I'm not a big drinker. I was 3 vodkas in.
You're not? No?
I'm not.
No, you're not a big drinker now. Huh?
Things must have changed.
The record may...
It's a little blurry. And then by my third cocktail, I go, yeah, maybe I'll play third base. And 2 weeks later, it happened that quickly. So it just happened within 10 days.
I mean, that the core of that group that gets together, obviously, some things happen in between. Then you win a world championship, and after another little spell of not. What does that championship do in your mind?
Shit is hard, man. I mean, winning is hard. It's difficult to do. There's been plenty of years before 2009, we thought we were going to win a World Series. We thought we had a team that was going to win, no doubt. I mean, you can go to 2004. We had 3-0 lead against Boston. We thought we were going to win a World Series. So it is hard to do. I never took it for granted. I know Alex didn't because he hadn't won it before then. But it's a lot of work, man. It really is a lot of work. So I don't want to say you exhale. You can exhale for a minute, but then you have to get ready for the next year. But every team is different. You know, with the group of 2009, we had some new players. We had CeCe, we had AJ, we had Tex. But some of the guys that were there before, we had been through some losing seasons. So, man, it was a good feeling.
I'll tell you, for me, Jason, I remember giving Derek a big hug at Yankee Stadium, but it was so much relief. I certainly exhaled because I had played 15 years. And ultimately, I mean, I would have been absolutely heartbroken to move position, to come here for the greater good of the team, and to come up short. Remember, I grew up watching Dan Marino and Charles Barkley, two of my favorites.
Right.
And it breaks my heart to this day. They say but.
Yeah.
And moving, it was just complete validation. And I was just so thankful to God to put this thing to come true. You know, as a great baseball fan, it was the greatest thrill of my baseball career by far. And I would move to third base 100 out of 100 times to be part of the Yankees championship run that year.
One thing, you know, that Alex was talking about, switching positions and finally winning a championship, you know, the guys that were there before, I say there was a few of us that were there before. We also didn't want at the end of our career say, oh, well, we were lucky. We won not lucky, but we won 4 out of 5 our first 5 years in the big leagues. And then we couldn't win again, you know? So the thing in New York is it's a constant reminder every single day that you have not won. You know what I mean? It's like, you got to win this year. You got to. They don't care what you've done in the past, which is the reason why I think a lot of people can't play in New York. You can't deal with the expectation level. So we were constantly reminded from 2000 up into 2009. So you get tired of hearing the fact that you haven't won in 9 years. You need to win again. And I think, you know, New York is a hot spot. You talk about the business part of it. New York is a hot spot. So when you win, I'm sure it elevates everyone at that point, you know, because I've always said playing in Yankee Stadium is like performing on a Broadway play. You feel like it's the top ticket in town. You know, you feel like the lights are brighter. Everyone comes out, every celebrity, you know, every entertainer is there to watch the Yankees play. And the reason they show up is because you win.
One thing I've always marveled at, Derek, I've gone through so much in my life through therapy and all that kind of stuff to really... It was around, I'm 48 now, it was around 45 where I look back at Derek's career and I said, holy shit, I really got an opportunity. I never thought we would ever get close again because we've had, you know, our setbacks, partly because of my shortcomings. But I said, I really have an opportunity to appreciate what an incredible career you had and to be in the greatest city, the biggest market in the world, but yet be a little bit unknown of what's going on off the field. And I remember how much I failed and tripped. And the more I tried, it was like quicksand. The deeper I would get myself into it. And Derek would say two things to me. All you got to do is make contact. You're so damn strong. Stop striking out. And then he would say to me, you don't have to tell them anything. And when he told me that, it didn't make sense. How the hell did you do that and do it so well?
I always wanted to have a separation with what I did publicly, my job, my career, and my private life. I truly believe once you let the toothpaste out of the tube, you cannot put it back in. Once you give people a little taste of what you're doing in your private life, they want more, they want more, they want more, and they feel as though you owe it to them. Now, I understand it. I was just never comfortable sharing my private life. You know, I always wanted to keep it to myself because my job came first. I wanted no distractions. And I also understood, you know, when you're playing professional sports, I knew I did not need the media to do my job. Eventually, they're going to need me at some point, right? So if I went out and performed on the field, I didn't have to worry about what anyone said, because one, I wasn't opening the door to my private life. So the only thing you could talk about or confirm was what I did on the field. And I just had an understanding of that from a young age. I don't think anyone told me it. I just knew that I would try to do whatever I could in my mind to limit distractions. I would address something once. That's it. I wouldn't talk about it again. The more you talk about it, the more the story continues on. When people would ask us about our stuff, I would address it one time. Don't ask me again.
Yeah, and I would talk about it every week. And he's like, dude, you're killing me. Like, you don't have to answer. He was great. I mean, by the way, stuff I would never talk about publicly to anyone, but there was some real stuff that I was going through in my life that he gave me the greatest advice, and I didn't listen, and it hurt me tremendously. So my point is, over the years, I get to understand Derek Jeter's greatness as a human being so much more than when I played, because I was just too close to it. And quite honestly, I didn't have the tools. And that's not an excuse. I really tried. I just didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was pretty good on the field, though. And that's where I shined,
Were you frustrated with him when he didn't listen to you?
Well, I would only say frustrated if it became a big story.
Yeah.
Like, if we're talking about things that didn't matter on the field, not just with him. I mean, it could be anyone. That was frustrating, because I wanted, when I got to the park, to the stadium, I wanted the conversation to be about the game. And that's it.
Yeah. And so in your business life, one of the really interesting decisions you make, and I feel like this is actually of a piece, is to go with Jordan Brand. I mean, that's a big decision on your part, and you're sort of early in the game. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
Tell us about that decision, because that's seminal not just for you, but it's candidly seminal for that brand too.
Yeah, I first met Michael in 1994 while he was playing baseball in the Arizona Fall League.
Wow.
And I'll point it out, he was not as bad as everyone makes him out to be. I mean, you take off, since Little League, and then you play in baseball at 30 years old in Double-A, you hit 200, that's a 10-year contract today. Yeah, exactly. Right.
That's pretty damn good.
Yeah, it's not easy to do. So he was not as bad as everyone says. So I first met him in Arizona, and we just developed a relationship from there. He's like a big brother to me, like Magic is to you. Mm-hmm. I know you speak highly about Magic all the time. He's one of the first athletes alongside Magic that really took their abilities on the court and it translated into business. They had the business mindset, because, up until that point, and I'm not saying anything about previous athletes, but it was all, you just perform on the court, or you perform on the field. When your career's over, that's it. Go get them. Figure something else out. I think those two were business savvy, and they thought about post-professional athletic career. And, Michael's been as successful as anyone.
Yeah.
And he's been a mentor to me since. He's like a big brother, like I said, and just thankful he asked me to be a part of the Jordan brand. And, when it first started, we're like, what do you mean part of it's a basketball brand? What is a baseball player going to do?
Right.
But he wanted me to be the baseball player and help him build the business. So
did it feel risky to do that, to be like the first baseball player to do that?
Well, I think risky. I mean, if you're going to take a risk, I think you take it with someone like Michael.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily think it was risky on my part. Plus it was the cool factor.
Right.
I mean, everyone wanted to be associated with Michael back then, and
now,
yeah, now too. Yeah, you're right. Good point. Same thing. So I didn't look at it as being risky.
Yeah. So let's shift to sort of post baseball, and we talk about this a lot, and Alex has shared some of this before, but that moment when you decide to retire, I mean, there's the decision, and then there's the execution, and the moment when you are no longer a professional athlete, you're no longer a New York Yankee, at least as your job. You'll always be a New York Yankee, et cetera. But what is that moment like when you wake up that morning, you're like, okay.
The decision or afterwards?
Tell us both. Tell us about the decision and then after.
Well, the decision was not a difficult decision. They would have got rid of me anyway. They were trying to run me out. So I don't think the decision wasn't.
Join the club.
Yeah, the decision wasn't a difficult decision. I'd broken my ankle twice. I'd basically missed the previous year, and I wanted to have one more season. I wanted to play a season healthy. So I called Hal Steinbrenner and told him, and he said, look, you deserve to announce it any way you want to announce it. I announced it before the season started because I knew if I did not, that I'd be asked about it all the time. Every single day. My teammates would be asked about it. So I announced it before the season. And then when the season was over with, man, I was tired. I really was tired. It's 20 years in New York. I've jokingly said it's like dog years. It's 140 years playing in New York. And I got everything I could get out of my career. And physically, I was done.
What's your business mindset at that point? Because obviously you've been thinking about it for a time. You're partnered with Jordan Brandon, those sorts of things. And we've talked about this. You're in New York. So, I mean, you have access and, beyond name recognition, you have sort of access to a lot of corporate minds, investment minds, et cetera. What are the first few things that you think about doing?
Well, first, I didn't start preparing for post-playing career the day I woke up the next day, right? Afterwards, I started preparing for post-career years in advance. One of my biggest fears in life is being unprepared in anything. A lot of times you hear athletes say game slows down or it speeds up. I think it speeds up when you're unprepared. So I didn't want to wake up and say, what am I going to do next? I started talking about team ownership maybe 10 years left in my career. During my career, I made every decision when it came to contract negotiations, marketing, philanthropy. I have my own foundation. These are all pillars of an organization. I lived in Tampa. I learned about player development and scouting and analytics. I wanted to be as prepared as I could. I started a company called the Players Tribune. We actually launched right after my career.
Right.
But I didn't just wake up and say, let's start a company today.
Right.
You start thinking about these things. And that's why I think that it made my transition into the business world, so to speak, a lot easier because I started preparing and I started learning for it.
And Derek, when you talk about the Marlins, Theo, I think you look at the top 3 payrolls in baseball today, and nothing against them. It is hard to win. That team that went to the playoffs this year from the Marlins with very, very limited resources has your handprints all over it. The pitching, the development, the people you hired. And I was in the community and I just heard all the great things you were doing in that community. What would you say was the hardest part and the best part of being CEO and owner of the Marlins?
The hardest part was having patience because you want things, as a player, you get a hit, you don't get a hit. You win a game, you lose a game. It's instant gratification or failure. When you're building something, like especially an organization, a sports organization, where basically you're turning something around, right? You're going in another direction. It takes time. That can be very, very draining mentally because you want it to happen right away. And that was probably the hardest part, is trying to have some patience. I don't have a lot of patience. And even
more time with limited resources.
Yeah.
And nothing against your partners, but that market, it could be very, very challenging.
Yeah.
If you were in New York or Boston, the resources are just tremendous and you can actually expedite it a little bit. But here you had to be very clever, gritty. You had to roll up your sleeves.
I figured, we played in New York. You show up at Yankee Stadium, there's 50,000 people there. That's just how it works. One of the first things I did when I was CEO in Miami was I brought every single member of the front office by department into the clubhouse and I introduced them to the players because I wanted the players to see how many people were working behind the scenes to make their jobs easier. Everyone said, how long they've been with the organization, what exactly it is that they do. There were employees that had been there for 20 plus years and never stepped foot in a major league clubhouse. And now the employees thank me, but the players also thank me. Because like I said, you don't understand that part of it. So building an organization and taking the time and spending the time, I expected that. When you care about something, you put in the work. It took a long time to try to develop trust. I can't walk in the room and say, trust me. You don't know me, right? So you got to get to know a lot of people. Spend a lot of time in the Miami community, getting to know a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I'm in Miami. I'm not moving now. I'm there. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy that I had a chance to do that. But that's a part of building an organization that people don't see, the stuff that goes on behind the scenes.
You exit that situation. How do you look back on it and how does it influence what you do next?
Oh man, how do I look back on it? I take the good with the bad. I think you learn a lot of lessons. I'm happy with some of the hires that I had. I wanted to have a diverse front office. I was able to accomplish that. I didn't do it because I wanted to focus on it. I did it because it was the right thing.
Yeah.
You hire the right people. You give people opportunities. I was given opportunities throughout my life. You want to return that. So I look back with, I try to focus on the positive. I'm positive by nature, so there's a lot of things that we accomplished that I'm happy with. And those are some lessons that I've learned. There's mistakes that have been made. I won't make those mistakes again.
If there's ever another opportunity with what you learned, and I'm sure, there's nothing you can do because of the reputation you've built and your track record speaks for itself. If an opportunity came calling, and let's just say it's not a smaller market, let's just say it's a mid-market or even a large market, and they wanted you to be the owner and operate again.
I don't have enough money.
My question
Let's
is,
be honest.
would you want another crack at it? Would you be open to it?
Man, that's a tough question. You never say never,
Right.
But you have to be there. You have to be present. And I have 4 young kids now, man, and I understand how difficult it is. And, you want to get into a situation where you can make decisions, make all decisions. And unless you have a controlling ownership stake, you can't make those decisions. So that's a tough one to answer. But you ask me now, no.
And Derek, how do you think about investing? Does investing excite you? Are you someone that picks up the phone and calls a Michael or calls Posada, one of your friends? Do you share ideas? How do you think about investing when opportunities come your way? Because there's going to be viewers that are going to say, I would love to have my hero, Derek Jeter, invest in my company. I'm a young founder. How do you think about that? How do people approach you? How do they find you?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits and perks of playing in New York is you get a chance to meet a lot of people. I've met a lot of people throughout my career. I still get a chance to meet a lot of people. The way I look at it, Alex, is I invest in people. You run into people all the time that have great ideas. Everyone has a great idea. Everyone has a business, going to be a $1 billion business. But you have to invest in people and you have to get to know them and you have to know if they're passionate about what they're doing. Some people have businesses where they're in it to make money. Look, we all want to make money. But if that's your number one priority, if you're not passionate about it, then I think that's a red flag. So I always like to invest in people. I think that works works in clubhouses and it works in businesses. It works in investments. So I tend to just lean towards the character and the passion of the people.
So one of the more recent decisions that you've made is to, join the commentating world, which I believe you had initially said no interest there. Now, part of it was you were an owner and CEO of a team. What drew you to the commentating booth? I'd
been asked that question before, and I was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing this. I went to World Series last year, and I was just on the set with these guys.
Was that Philly?
In Philly, yeah. For a few minutes, and just saw how much fun they were having, and one thing that I never wanted to do was to get into a situation where I had to be overly critical of players because I know how hard it is to play the game. And I saw how much fun they were having and I was asked to be a part of it. And I said, hey, as long as we can have fun with it, I don't want to be overly analytical, which I know he agrees with, and just really get a chance to shine a light on the sport. I love baseball.
Yeah.
I really do love baseball. I think it's the greatest game in the world. And if we have a chance to shine a light on it, then I'm all for it.
And Alex, you and I have talked about this. I mean, it does feel like this has been, we may look back on this as a really critical year in the history of baseball. Rule changes. I think the storylines have been really good. Do you agree with that? I mean, is there something that has happened and what is it that is sort of causing a little bit of a, dare I say, rebound for baseball?
Yeah, baseball's lagged behind other sports. You go through the history of other sports, NFL, NBA, there's always rule changes. There's always a 3-point shot. There's all, you change the rules for the betterment of the game. And no matter how you look at it, it's entertainment. You get the fans watching. You have to listen to the fans. And I think the fans in baseball were saying, look, one, the game's too long. Right? You got to find a way to speed it up. So I think baseball deserves some credit for making some rule changes. And I'm sure there'll probably be more adjustments along the way.
Well, and kind of stitching that back to something you were talking about a minute ago, Derek, is, you show up on set last year, you see these guys. What's it been like sort of working with the crew?
I'm new, man. I mean, I'm new. I mean, seriously, the first game we're in London, they threw me at the desk like 5 minutes before. I can't even figure out how to get my earpiece in.
Right.
I have no idea. They're talking in my ear and I'm trying to answer them and I'm like, I'm not supposed to be answering them, so it's a learning experience. I think you get more and more comfortable as you go through it. Alex is a pro. He's been doing it for a long time. He enjoys it. I remember when we were playing, I used to tell him, you're going to get into, TVs. Oh, never. Now look at him. He's on every channel you turn. He's doing a game here. He's doing a game there. So he's
hosting a podcast. Like he's doing everything.
He's doing everything. It's you learn. You hope to get better. I know I've made mistakes, but ultimately you just want to have fun. You want the viewers watching to have fun.
I've been asked about a lot of players. Obviously none as big as Derek. So when they approach me about, hey, what do you think about Derek? Would you be okay with it? I'm like, of course I'll be okay with it. That's something that he has to figure out if he wants to do. And they were asking me basically, what's a scouting report? Pitching, we say, if we're facing Jason, like, what does he got, right?
Yeah.
And I said, look, you're never going to find someone that is more prepared. You're never going to find, he'll never be unprepared. So he's going to come ready to play every day. He understands entertainment. He understands being part of a team. He has a really good relationship with Big Papi. My relationship is solid, and he's going to love Kevin Burkhardt. So I think he'll fit great. And, obviously they got to talking, and so far he's off to an amazing start. I'm actually in awe of how quickly he's adjusted, because it took me a while to get going. I mean, he's probably at the 2-week mark where I was at the 2-year mark. So I'm excited. We're going to have a great run. And by the way, you said it best. We're talking and highlighting the greatest baseball players in the world. We've had a phenomenal year, and our job is to be an extension of Rob Manfred and Tony Clark and all the great things they're doing, and we get to do it on a national stage when everybody pays attention.
The other thing about it, when you're talking baseball, this is what the way I try to look at it is, whatever we say is not wrong.
Right.
It may not sound right. It may not come out right. You may not articulate it well, but it's not wrong. It's your opinion.
Yeah.
And we played the game for a long time, and people don't have to necessarily agree with our opinions, but it's not wrong.
Yeah.
One of the lessons I learned, and, again, Derek and I are opposites. Like, I've made every mistake in the book. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. But when we're out there, to Derek's point, talking about players, managers, front offices, the lesson I learned is you can be critical as long as you're not personal, right? And you can say something like, look, I think Jason's one of my favorite players, but he's had a rough week. And if you ask him, he'll be the first one to admit that. But here's what I think Jason's going to do. I think he's going to do X, Y, Z, right? Versus taking a personal shot. And I think that's a really fine line. You want to stay in the right side of that.
All right. So I got to say,
you don't have to say, but go ahead.
I am going to say it. So when I saw that you were coming over and you guys were going to work together, even, when I came in here today, it's like, how's this going to go between these two? Because there is history there. You guys seem good.
People need to put it to bed, I think, at some point. I mean, Jesus, this was 20-something year. I've known him for 30 years, you know what I mean? And I get asked more about our relationship than I do my wife. You know what I'm saying? It's just, it doesn't, I mean, it's just put it to bed. I mean, we said we're fine. We're working together again. You can't change history. History happened, right? It's over and done with. You move on.
What's funny, our partners, Hannah and Jack, I think they're happy that we're in this place. I've had so many New York Yankee fans come up and say, I'm so glad that you guys, I don't care if you're best friends, I'm just glad that you guys are working together.
Yeah.
And when they have their hero and someone that they admire together, that won together, I think it's warming to their heart to know that we are getting along.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
And so when you think about, I mean, and this is a question for Derek, and I don't know if you and I have ever really talked about it, Alex, this idea of playing for the Yankees, like, I mean, it hits different, and so what do you think about as your legacy, especially as a Yankee, as you look back, 20-year career there, like what jumps to your mind? What do you think is the most important thing? What's the thing that you want to be most remembered for as a Yankee?
I mean, you want to be remembered as being a good teammate. You know, you want to be remembered as winning, obviously. Who you are on the field, I think off the field. But for me, I've always said the only thing I care about is being remembered as a Yankee, because it's the only thing the only team I wanted to play for, only thing I wanted to be remembered for. So I'm fine with that. You know, I'm fine with that. That's if my legacy is just being a member of the Yankees, I'm fine.
Yeah, and I probably share this with so many Yankee fans around the world. Like just playing 25 feet from Derek, regardless of what was happening with the noise that I created, it was such an incredible feeling. And again, with time and perspective, it makes you appreciate it even more, that the guy that was playing next to me was always going to be prepared and ready to play. And that meant so much to me. And I think no matter what the relationship has happened, like that mutual respect on the field has always been, I think, 100.
Yeah.
We had that commonality about we both want to win at the highest level. Like I never had to worry about Derek playing hard or running hard or did he watch film? Never. And that's something that to me, I always underscore.
One of the most fascinating things about athletes at this point in their careers, for former athletes, and Alex and I talk about this all the time, is you've got all this time when you leave the game ahead of you. I say this because we're roughly the same age. You're a young man. What's your legacy for this part of your career and your life?
That's a good question. Yeah, because you say, you know, when you're an athlete, you turn 30, everyone starts telling you you're old.
Right.
You retired at 40, and then you're young again. Right. Now, the only thing that matters to me the most is being a good parent. That's it. I'm biased. My parents, the best thing I can say about my parents is they were present. You know, I want to be there for my kids. That's the number one priority for me. It really is. I'm not just saying it.
Yeah.
It is the number one priority for me, is to be there with my family, with my kids, help them find the thing that they're passionate about. I don't care what it is. I just want them to find something that they're passionate about. I want them to work extremely hard at it, and I want to be there to support them. So I think that is number one for me.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you both. I mean, we're doing this together, but I feel like I learned a ton about the Yankees, both of your business ambitions, and really appreciate you being as candid and thoughtful as you are.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Captain.